So, Speaker Pelosi is now saying that y'all are going to be moving forward, sending these articles of impeachment over to the Senate. It took a while, maybe, and Mitch McConnell hasn't really changed his mind on anything. So what are you all going to do that's different? And do you anticipate him changing his mind, or are you just doing what y'all do and he'll figure it out?
Well, I don't anticipate that Mitch McConnell is going to change his mind, but what I am hoping is that the public pressure to have a fair trial will mean that these moderate Republican members of the Senate will insist on hearing from people like John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney and others who have first information about the president's effort to shake down a foreign leader to help him cheat in an election. If we had merely rushed the articles over there and given McConnell the chance to sweep it under the rug before the country could be informed about the kind of non-trial he wanted to have, I think it might have led to a different result. At least we have the prospect now of holding senators accountable and insisting on a trial with witnesses. If McConnell succeeds in dismissing this case without witnesses, it will be the first impeachment case, not just involving a president, but involving anyone in the nation's history in which a trial went forward without witnesses.
Hello, Congressman Schiff. It's your best friend, Meghan McCain. Hello. Ethics aside, impeachment is a deeply political process, and given the intense divide over the issue and the current standoff that you guys are having, do you think, just purely political, was this a good political move for Democrats, and is there any indication that this has damaged President Trump, because poll numbers say that it hasn't?
Well, I think if you're going to look at the poll numbers, what you'll see over the last 3 months is the country moving from a majority of Americans believing that we shouldn't even have an impeachment investigation to overwhelming support for the investigation, and a majority, although a narrow majority of Americans, saying that the Senate should convict and remove the president from office. So that's been a pretty substantial change. In terms of what impact it will have in November, I really can't say. That's not a question, frankly, I've been asking myself, because I don't think that's my role. I think we in the House had to determine, is this the right thing to do? Is this the constitutionally required thing to do? And what convinced me, Meghan, and you may recall I was not eager to go down the road to impeachment, is when the president committed this latest and most egregious misconduct, the shakedown of the Ukrainian president, withheld military support to an ally at war, and was on the phone literally the day after Bob Mueller testified, the day after the president believed he had escaped accountability for the first foreign interference to help his election. He was back at it again. That told me that he believes he is above the law, unaccountable, and we needed to move forward. Even if the Senate won't do their constitutional duty, we in the House need to do ours.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your side of the argument, but President Clinton's impeachment trial lasted only a month, and if that's the case, Senate Democrats who are running for president in 2020 are all going to be holed up on the Hill instead of campaigning well into the first two primaries. So say what you will about the Constitution and duty, this will hurt Democrats politically. Do you disagree?
Well, look, I think if senators are doing their job, if they are being impartial jurors, if they are doing their duty under the Constitution, that ought to inure to their benefit. I've always felt that the best campaign was simply doing a good job, and I don't think voters are going to hold it against senators for taking the impeachment of a president of the United States seriously. So I don't think it should be an impediment to them. But more important, I don't think it's a question of say what you will about the Constitution. I think it is our duty to uphold the Constitution. And if we allow a president to behave like this, if we allow a president, this president or any other, to seek foreign help, to coerce foreign help in a U.S. election, if we let a president obstruct any investigation into their own wrongdoing, that is going to have enormous repercussions. We're going to have to expect a far greater degree of corruption and malfeasance, not only with this president, but any other in the future. So there's a lot at stake here, and if it means that senators are off the campaign trail for a couple more weeks, I think it's worth the trade.
Okay. Hi, this is Joy Behar speaking right now. So the good news is 71% of Americans want to hear from witnesses at the Senate trial. They really do. But I have a question. If that doesn't happen, how seriously are you considering calling new witnesses like Bolton in the House? You guys never issued a subpoena for Bolton because he said he'd fight it. Will you issue one now? He sounds like he's interested in coming by and testifying. What are you going to do?
We are considering whether to subpoena him in the House. If we're approaching this rationally, though, The senators will be the triers of fact. They should hear from the witness firsthand. It makes little sense to have the House depose John Bolton and then submit that deposition to the Senate. The Senate ought to hear from him quite directly. I also have to say that I'm skeptical that Mr. Bolton will appear before the House. He's refused to in the past. He's only said he will appear before a Senate subpoena. And yes, we could expose that there's no constitutional or legal basis to distinguish between a House and Senate subpoena. But our goal is not to make John Bolton look bad or expose the hypocrisy of that position. Our goal is to have a fair trial in the Senate, to let the senators evaluate the evidence. And unless the senators are prepared to say there's no factual issue to contest, we fully accept the House has made the case that the president did withhold this White House meeting, did try to extort the Ukrainian leader to help him cheat in the election. Unless they're willing to say that there's no factual dispute, the senators need to hear from these additional witnesses. There's really no case to be made against it. And one final point, and this is often neglected, the documents may be every bit as important. The president has refused to provide a single document in the investigation. We've never had this kind of a wholesale obstruction of Congress. Those documents may be very telling and undoubtedly very damning, because the ones that have come out most recently once again reveal in incriminating fashion the president's misconduct. So those documents need to be produced as well.
Congressman Abby Huntsman here. Thank you for joining us. I actually do have a question on the witnesses that we've been talking about. Do you worry that if you open the door to witnesses like John Bolton, that Republicans, we're talking about a fair trial, Republicans, they're going to call in the Bidens, even you, to testify? Trump re-upped his calls for you and for Speaker Nancy Pelosi over the weekend. He was tweeting all about that. Joe Biden has said that he would not testify, then he said he would testify. Would you, if asked, be willing to testify if you were subpoenaed?
Look, I'm not a fact witness, so other than mollifying the president, I'm not sure why the Senate would call me or Nancy Pelosi as a witness.
But if it is a fair trial, though, you could very well see the case where the Bidens would have to be there.
Yes.
You think that is a good thing politically? You think that's a good thing for impeachment as a whole?
I think what the senators would have to evaluate is, do the Bidens have any relevant testimony? And I think the answer is that they don't. What is at issue here is whether the president withheld military aid, withheld official acts like a White House meeting in order to coerce a country to announce investigations, not even conduct them, but just announce them to help smear his opponent. And there's not much light that Joe Biden or Hunter Biden can shed on the president's conduct. So, yes,
then
the
senators...
senators...
Why not have them show up and just say, if you have nothing to hide, then come out there and tell the American people that? Because they want to hear both sides.
Because it would convert the Senate trial into the same kind of a sham proceeding that the president sought to have Ukraine undertake. There's been no factual basis for these allegations against Joe Biden, no factual basis for the allegation that Ukraine, not Russia, interfered in the 2016 election. That is a Russian propaganda talking point. And to ask the Senate to do these investigations that the president fraudulently sought to get Ukraine to conduct would merely turn the Senate trial on its head. Now, that's something the president would love, but that's not a fair trial. That's a sham trial. And so I think what the senators ought to do is they should take their oath to be impartial seriously and make this a serious and fair trial, fair to the president, yes, but also fair to the American people.
Adam Schiff, you're going to stick around. We're going to talk a little bit more when we come back. Adam Schiff, Sonny.
Congressman, this is Sonny. Switching gears to Iran, you're the Intel Committee chairman and a member of the Gang of Eight, the bipartisan group of leaders who are supposed to be briefed on classified intelligence matters by the executive branch. So you were in the room for the highly classified briefing on General Soleimani. President Trump now says he believes that Soleimani was planning to attack 4 embassies, including bombing the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. Did you hear any intelligence to support that claim?
No, I didn't hear reporting that 4 embassies were targeted, and here's what we think and when we think it's going to happen. It really was much more like something the secretary said and then tried to walk back. Secretary Pompeo acknowledged the other day, we didn't know precisely where, we didn't know precisely when. That directly, of course, contradicts the idea the president is putting out there that we knew 4 specific embassies were targeted. Look, I don't think the evidence, the intelligence justifies the targeted killing of a loathsome and, yes, bloodthirsty person nonetheless, but justify the targeted killing of Soleimani if it was going to increase the risk to Americans. And the missile attacks that Iran took as a result of that strike could have killed dozens of our service members. And thank God that didn't happen. But the risk, I think, to our personnel has gone up, not down. And I don't think it was justified by the intelligence, at least not the intelligence that I've seen.
Okay, right.
That Ukrainian plane would still be alive.
That's
The
what
folks
people
on
on
this
the people on that plane would
plane.
still be alive today. So Trump didn't notify the so-called Gang of Eight because before he took out Soleimani, but he did tell Lindsey Graham on the golf course. Now he claims that he didn't share the news with you or Nancy because you'd leak it to the media. Your reaction, sir?
Well, it's embarrassing for a president to behave the way this one does and say half the things that he does. The fact that the fact that the only person in Congress apparently who was briefed on this was Lindsey Graham, either on the golf course or at the buffet line, tells you all you need to know about how seriously this president takes his responsibility to consult with Congress. I'm glad we passed a resolution in Congress to reassert Congress's role in the war-making process. We came perilously close to an all-out war with Iran over the last week. Congress needs to exercise the authority it's given by the Constitution to declare war or refuse to authorize war. And here, I think, where you have an impulsive president, where you have a president, I think, with little regard for the long-term consequences of his actions, it's all the more important that there be some constraint, and that constraint Congress gives to the Constitution gives to Congress.
He also doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He doesn't seem to have a grasp of foreign affairs, as far as I can tell.
He knows enough to be touting the fact that he thinks he's done this amazing strike and that that he knows best. But again, that airplane full of people, I think, would contradict that.
Well, and Whoopi, if you look at the long-term record of the Trump administration on Iran, this campaign of maximum pressure has resulted in Iran going back to enriching uranium, going back to potentially having enough enriched uranium for a bomb. Iran that is taking missile strikes on U.S. Bases or bases that we share with the Iraqis. An Iran that has now a dominant influence in places like Lebanon and Syria. This maximum pressure campaign has maximally failed. It has made the danger to Americans that much greater, and it has not constrained Iran. So the track record is not encouraging. And to come this close to war, a war that Americans don't want and Congress hasn't authorized, shows you just how dangerous this strategy has been.
Well, I hope that you all take as seriously as we do when you issue things like subpoenas. Maybe we don't know because we're not sitting with you, but sometimes it does seem like y'all are taking an awful long time to make everyone recognize that we all have to pay attention to a subpoena. Because if I could go over to my boss and say, do I have to do this subpoena? My boss would kick me square in the behind and I'd have to go deal with the subpoena. I want y'all to take this as seriously as the American people do. What?
I was going to say, can we answer that?
Yeah, why did
Well, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
And look, this president has been impeached over his refusal to allow witnesses to testify, over his orders that witnesses obstruct the Congress. So we do take this very seriously.
Sir,
and you're right. And
I gotta
anyone
stop
else.
you. You have to
Yes.
come. Next time we do this, you should be sitting in the chair. It'll be easier. Thanks to